Emma arrived at the resort on a warm, breezy afternoon, her worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the luxurious grounds. The resort looked like a dream to anyone else. Pristine white buildings with towering windows, palm trees swaying gently in the wind, and the scent of salt water drifting in the air. To the guests who strolled along the polished walkways in their designer clothes, it was paradise. But Emma wasn't like them. She wasn't in a silk dress or carrying a designer bag. Her sundress, though simple and practical, seemed to make her stand out like a sore thumb. She wasn't here for the glittering experience. She was here for a much quieter reason, a brief escape from the world, a few days of peace and quiet by the ocean. When she stepped into the lobby, the first thing she noticed was the silence. A cool breeze flowed in through the wide glass doors, and the white marble floors gleamed. She approached the reception desk, where a young woman was busy typing on her computer. Emma gave a gentle smile, but the receptionist barely glanced up. "Hello, I have a reservation," Emma said, her voice soft. The receptionist blinked once, then twice, before scanning the computer screen. "Name?" she asked, her tone flat. "Emma Hartley," Emma replied, waiting for the usual confirmation. There was a pause. The receptionist's fingers hovered over the keys, then typed something in a bit too forcefully. "You're here alone?" she asked, glancing at Emma's simple dress and unassuming appearance. Emma nodded, unfazed by the question. "Yes, I'm traveling by myself." The receptionist raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. After a long moment, she handed over a key card without saying much else. "Your room's on the second floor. Enjoy your stay." Emma took the card and thanked her quietly, then turned to head toward the elevator. The lobby was filled with guests, each one wearing designer outfits, carrying expensive handbags, and speaking in voices that echoed with wealth. None of them paid any attention to Emma as she passed, and Emma didn't mind. She wasn't here for them. She wasn't here for any of it. She just wanted a few days of peace. As she entered the elevator and pressed the button for the second floor, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her sun-kissed skin and simple brown hair were nothing special in this world of polished glamour, but that didn't bother her. It never had. The doors slid shut, and the elevator hummed as it ascended. Emma sighed, thinking about how much she needed this time away. The last few weeks had been a blur of stress, phone calls, and endless meetings. Now at least, she could enjoy a quiet afternoon by the sea. What she didn't know, though, was that the calm she was seeking was about to be shattered. The next morning, Emma woke up early, the sound of the waves crashing gently against the shore drifting through the open balcony doors. Sunlight poured in, painting the room with soft golden hues. She stretched, feeling the quiet peace of the resort seep into her bones. It was exactly what she needed, a break from the chaos of her life. She got dressed in the same simple sundress she'd worn the day before, and after a quick breakfast, decided to explore the resort. As she stepped out of her room, she could hear laughter and chatter coming from the pool area, where groups of well-dressed guests lounged under umbrellas, sipping colorful drinks. The air was thick with the scent of expensive sunscreen and perfumes. She gave them a passing glance before walking toward the beach. But it didn't take long for her to realize she was being watched. A couple of staff members, standing near the pool bar, exchanged looks when they saw her. Their eyes lingered a little too long. Emma, aware of their stares, tried to ignore the discomfort rising in her chest. She was used to this, the quiet judgment of those who didn't fit in. She had always preferred the quiet, unnoticed corners of the world. As she reached the beach, she found a small spot under a palm tree and sat down. The cool breeze ruffled her hair and she breathed in the fresh air, feeling the tension from the past weeks slowly begin to melt away. She could hear the distant voices of the guests, but they felt so far removed, almost like a dream. It wasn't long before a man in a crisp, tailored suit appeared in front of her. His dark eyes studied her for a moment before he spoke, his tone polite but firm. "Excuse me, miss," he began, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "I'm afraid the beach area is reserved for hotel guests only. You'll need to move." Emma looked up at him, momentarily taken aback. He wasn't rude, but there was something about the way he spoke that felt cold, like she didn't belong here. She stood up slowly, brushing the sand off her dress. "I am a guest," she replied, keeping her voice calm. The man's eyes flicked to the staff nearby and then back to her. He didn't look convinced. "I'm sorry, miss, but you're not listed as a guest here. I'll need to ask you to leave the premises." Emma's heart sank. She had expected the resort to be a place of peace, but now it was becoming clear that her presence wasn't welcome. She stood there for a moment, trying to process what was happening. She had checked in, had the key to her room, and had every right to be here. But now this man was asking her to leave as if she were an intruder. "I'll call security," he added, his voice growing colder. The sharpness of his words felt like a blow. Emma's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Without saying another word, she turned and walked back to the resort, trying to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow her. The feeling of isolation crept back in. This wasn't the peaceful escape she had imagined. Emma walked back toward the resort, her footsteps heavy on the polished stone walkway. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She barely reached the entrance before she saw the resort manager, Victor, standing with two security guards by the door. They were waiting for her, and the sight of them made her stomach twist. "Miss Hartley," Victor said, his tone smooth but carrying an unmistakable air of authority. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Emma stopped in her tracks, her heart sinking. She knew what was coming. There was no way she could explain her way out of this. The whispers, the looks, they had already painted a picture of her in their eyes. Someone who didn't belong here. "I don't understand," Emma replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have a reservation. I'm a guest here." Victor nodded, but there was no warmth in his gesture. "Yes, we've reviewed your booking. Unfortunately, it seems your presence here has caused some concern among our other guests. The situation is uncomfortable." He glanced toward the pool area, where a few guests were watching from their lounge chairs. Their eyes were curious, some even judgmental. "I'm sorry," Victor continued, his tone barely changing, "but we're going to have to ask you to leave the resort." The words hit her like a punch. Emma blinked, trying to process what he was saying. She couldn't believe this was happening. She had paid for this stay, had followed every rule, and yet here she was, being treated like an unwelcome intruder. It was as though her presence had disrupted the perfect world they had built here. A world she never wanted to be part of, to begin with. "You're asking me to leave?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Victor replied, giving a brief nod to the security guards standing beside him. They were close now, ready to escort her off the property. "We've made arrangements for you to be taken to a nearby hotel. It's not a five-star place, but I'm sure it'll be more comfortable for someone like you." The words stung more than she expected. Someone like you. She knew what he meant. Someone who didn't belong in the luxury and exclusivity of this resort. "Please, Miss Hartley," Victor added, almost too calmly, "this doesn't have to be difficult. Just gather your things, and we'll make sure you're taken care of." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the embarrassment of being thrown out, or the cold, dismissive way they were handling her. She wanted to argue, to stand up for herself, but the sinking feeling in her chest told her that it wouldn't matter. In their eyes, she wasn't important enough to fight for. She nodded slowly, turning away from them. Her mind was spinning, and for a moment it felt like the world around her was shrinking. She headed toward her room, every step feeling heavier than the last. She grabbed her bag, and without looking back, she walked out of the door, not knowing where she would go next. As the door closed behind her, the resort's facade, its glossy, perfect image, seemed to crumble, leaving her standing in the harsh reality of being unwanted. Emma stepped out of the hotel lobby, her heart pounding in her chest. The cool ocean breeze felt sharp against her skin, but it couldn't wash away the sting of what had just happened. She had been kicked out of the resort, humiliated in front of everyone. All she wanted was a quiet escape, but now she was standing outside with nowhere to go. She stood at the edge of the resort property, watching as the staff went about their work, pretending not to notice her. She didn't want to go to another hotel. She didn't want to be somewhere else, where she would be just as invisible, just as unwanted. She wanted to be alone, to think, to breathe without feeling like she was being judged. With no clear plan, she walked toward the beach. The sand felt soft under her bare feet, and the sound of the waves crashing in the distance was strangely calming. She paused at the water's edge, looking out at the horizon. The ocean seemed endless, peaceful in its own way, but even the vastness of the sea couldn't soothe the knot in her stomach. She found a large rock a little further down the beach and sat down, wrapping her arms around her knees. The saltwater mist from the waves sprayed her face, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, letting it cool her burning skin. She was trying to push the thoughts out of her mind, the way Victor had spoken to her, the way the other guests had stared, as though she didn't belong. But it was hard to stop thinking about it. What was it about her that made them treat her like this? She wasn't trying to make trouble. She hadn't asked to be part of their world. She had just wanted to be somewhere quiet, away from everything. But instead, she had been an inconvenience, an outsider. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She looked up and saw a couple walking along the beach, laughing and holding hands. Their carefree happiness was like a sharp contrast to her own loneliness. She turned away quickly, not wanting to see them, not wanting to feel the emptiness inside her grow even bigger. A few moments passed before she heard another sound. This time it was the distant hum of a motor. She squinted toward the horizon and saw something large moving toward the shore. It was hard to make out at first, but as it got closer, she could see it clearly. A huge white yacht, cutting through the water like a giant, gleaming presence. Her heart skipped a beat, and her stomach tightened. It seemed completely out of place here, in the quiet stretch of beach where she sat. The yacht seemed to glide effortlessly toward the shore, and Emma watched it, transfixed by its size and beauty. It was a stark reminder of the world she didn't fit into. A world of wealth and luxury, a world that had kicked her out without a second thought. She sighed, leaning back against the rock, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her chest. If only she could disappear into the waves, drift away from everything, and never have to face the harsh judgment again. But she didn't disappear. Instead, she sat there, waiting for whatever came next, feeling more alone than ever. The hum of the yacht's engine grew louder as it approached the shore, cutting through the calm air. Emma, still sitting on the rock, couldn't take her eyes off the enormous vessel. It was hard to ignore something so grand, so out of place against the quiet beach. The yacht was pristine, with sleek white walls that shone under the sun and a golden name etched along its side. She squinted, trying to read it from a distance. Serafina, it said in elegant, shimmering letters. The sound of the boat's motor stopped as it neared the shore, and the stillness of the beach seemed to return. Emma stared, her thoughts tangled. She had seen yachts like this before, in magazines and on TV, always owned by the rich and famous. She had never dreamed of seeing one so close, especially not in her current situation. Her stomach twisted again, and she tried to push the thoughts aside. Why was she even thinking about it? She had no place in that world. As she sat there, lost in her own thoughts, the speedboat detached from the yacht, and a tall man stepped off it, making his way toward the beach. The boat's driver stayed behind, keeping the motor running as the man walked along the sand. He was dressed in a sharp, white suit, and his posture was confident, yet there was something unhurried about his movements. The man walked with purpose, his eyes scanning the shore until they landed on Emma. Emma didn't recognize him, but there was something oddly familiar about his face. Maybe it was the way he held himself, with the ease of someone used to being seen to being known. As he got closer, she stood up slowly, not sure if she should make herself scarce or stay where she was. She didn't want to be in his way, but he didn't seem to notice her hesitation. He walked straight toward her, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Emma," he said, his voice deep and warm, like he was greeting someone he hadn't seen in a long time. Her heart skipped. She didn't know how he knew her name or why he was approaching her at all. Her mind raced, but before she could speak, he continued. "You've been waiting long?" he asked, his eyes softening as he took in her confused expression. "Oh, who are you?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. His smile widened, and without another word, he closed the distance between them, wrapping her in a warm, gentle embrace. "I'm Alexander," he said softly, his voice full of affection. "Your husband." The words barely registered at first. "Husband?" She pulled back slightly, her mind struggling to catch up. Her eyes searched his face, trying to make sense of it. She didn't recognize him, but then there was something in his gaze that felt so familiar. So, right. You're here? She whispered, still trying to understand. Alexander nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, but I've been trying to get to you. The air around them seemed to shift. The confusion that had built up in Emma's chest began to dissolve, replaced with a sense of calm she hadn't expected. She hadn't even known she'd been waiting for him, but now that he was here, everything seemed to fall into place. And just like that, the chaos of the resort, the whispers, the rejection, it all felt like it belonged to a different life, a distant memory she could finally let go of. Alexander's embrace felt like a sudden anchor in a storm. Emma stood there for a moment, still in shock, her heart racing. She had been kicked out of the resort just hours earlier, humiliated and abandoned on the beach. And now here he was, a man she barely recognized yet felt somehow connected to. Her husband, as he had just said. Alexander, she whispered again, almost as if saying his name would make everything make sense. But how? Why are you here? He pulled back slightly, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. His gaze was soft, filled with understanding, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something protective. I knew something was wrong, he said, his voice steady but full of concern. I saw how you were treated back at the resort, and I couldn't stand it. Emma's confusion deepened. How did you know? I had a feeling you'd be here, he answered, glancing around the beach. I've been watching from the yacht, waiting for the right moment. When I saw them ask you to leave, I knew it was time. Waiting for the right moment, she repeated, still trying to process his words. Why didn't you come sooner? Alexander's expression softened. I wanted to, but I needed to be sure. You're strong, Emma, stronger than most people realize. I didn't want to make you feel like I was rescuing you. I wanted you to make your own choices, your own path. But when I saw you out here alone, his voice trailed off, as if the sight of her sitting by herself on the beach had been too much to bear. Emma didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this, hadn't even known he was looking for her. The reality of their relationship, of their life together, suddenly felt distant, almost foreign. She had always known Alexander was a successful businessman, but his world had never touched hers in such a direct way. They had lived separate lives until now, and the realization was overwhelming. You saw everything? She asked, her voice small. You saw them. Treat me like that. He nodded, his jaw tight. Yes, and it broke my heart. The way they looked at you, like you didn't belong here, like you were out of place. I don't want anyone making you feel like that, especially not when you're my wife. The word wife settled heavily between them. It felt both unfamiliar and intimate, as if it belonged to a different version of her. She had never imagined herself as part of a world like this, a world of yachts and luxury, of billionaires and high society. And yet, here she was, standing in the middle of it, with a man she hardly knew, yet felt deeply connected to. Why didn't you tell me before? She asked, her voice catching in her throat. Why didn't you ever mention this? Your world, all of this. Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't want to overwhelm you, he said. This world isn't easy to step into. I wanted to give you space, time to decide if this was the life you wanted. But now, seeing how they treated you, I realize I should have been more honest with you sooner. I'm sorry for that. Emma felt a sudden warmth spread through her chest. He wasn't perfect, but in that moment, she saw a side of him that was vulnerable, raw. He cared about her, really cared, and for the first time it felt like she wasn't just someone he married on paper. She was his wife, in every sense of the word. Emma stood there for a moment, the weight of Alexander's words sinking in. The man standing before her wasn't just some stranger who happened to show up at the right moment. He was her husband, a part of a world she had never truly known. And yet, here they were, the connection between them undeniable, even if it felt complicated. The sound of the waves crashing on the shore felt distant now, like they were part of a life that wasn't hers. She had never imagined herself living a life of wealth, yachts, and endless luxury. It wasn't what she had pictured for herself. But Alexander, he wasn't like the people she had met at the resort. There was something different about him. The way he cared, the way he watched over her from afar without making her feel suffocated, was something she hadn't expected. "So, what happens now?" she asked quietly, looking up at him. "What do we do now?" Alexander studied her for a moment, his gaze softening. He looked around, as if taking in the place they were standing, before turning his eyes back to her. "We go back to the yacht. I want you to see it, to see the life I can offer you. But most importantly, I want you to decide if this is what you want. No pressure, no expectations. Just you and me, figuring it out." The simplicity of his words took her by surprise. There was no force, no rush, just an open invitation to choose what felt right. Emma felt a knot of tension ease from her chest. This wasn't some grand gesture to win her over. It was a real choice, one that she could make on her own terms. "I don't know what to think," she admitted, her voice small but honest. "This whole world, it's so overwhelming. I don't know if it's what I want. I've never been part of anything like this. I don't even know where I fit in." Alexander's eyes softened. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You fit in with me," he said, his voice sincere. "That's all that matters. We'll figure the rest out together. You don't have to change anything about yourself. You just need to decide if you're willing to be part of this life with me." Emma looked down at their joined hands. It felt strange, yet comforting, to have someone who was offering her a choice without pushing her into anything. It was the first time in a long while that she had felt like she truly had control over her own future. She looked back at the yacht, now just a few feet away, the glimmer of the sea reflecting off its smooth surface. It was a life so far removed from her own, a life of luxury, of constant attention and glamour. But then there was Alexander, standing beside her, offering her a hand into that world with no strings attached. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of it," she said slowly, her mind still processing everything. "But I do know this. I want to figure it out. With you." A small smile tugged at Alexander's lips, his grip tightening around her hand. "Then let's take it one step at a time." And with that, the chaos of the past few hours seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of possibility. There was no rush. There were no expectations. Just two people, standing on the edge of something new, ready to see where it would take them. As Emma walked beside Alexander toward the yacht, the weight of the past few hours seemed to lift, bit by bit. The soft sound of the waves lapping against the shore and the distant hum of the yacht's engines created an oddly peaceful rhythm that helped clear her mind. She glanced up at the yacht once again, her heart still racing slightly. It was big, shiny, and perfect in every way, the kind of thing she had always thought only existed in magazines or movies. But now it was real, and it was hers to step into if she wanted to. Alexander's presence beside her was reassuring, his steady hand on her back guiding her forward. He hadn't pressured her once, hadn't tried to make her feel like she owed him anything. He was just there, offering her an open door, letting her decide whether or not to walk through it. It was a kind of gentleness she hadn't expected from a man like him. They reached the yacht's dock, where a crew member waited for them. He greeted Alexander with a nod, then turned his attention to Emma, his smile polite but distant. She didn't mind. She was used to feeling out of place around people who didn't know her, didn't understand her. But when Alexander turned to her, his expression soft and kind, it felt like everything was going to be okay. "This is it," Alexander said, his voice quiet but full of warmth. "Welcome aboard." Emma took a deep breath and stepped onto the boat, her feet barely making a sound on the smooth, polished wood. As she walked further inside, she couldn't help but be taken aback by how beautiful everything was. The interior was like nothing she'd ever seen. Elegant furniture, soft lighting, and huge windows that let in the view of the endless ocean beyond. Everything was luxurious, and it made her feel small, out of place. But then she glanced back at Alexander, who was watching her with an expression that said he understood her hesitation. He didn't expect her to love it right away. He just wanted her to see it, to understand that this was all real, not a dream or something she had to fight to fit into. "Do you want to look around?" he asked gently, sensing her uncertainty. Emma nodded, though her mind was still swirling. She hadn't realized how badly she needed this time to just breathe and take things in. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd like to." Alexander led her through the yacht, showing her the various rooms, the large, airy bedrooms with ocean views, the spacious lounge area with plush couches, and even the deck outside where they could sit and watch the sunset together. Everything was designed to perfection, and yet Emma found herself more focused on the small details. The way the sunlight streamed through the windows, the quiet hum of the yacht as it gently swayed with the waves. It was peaceful in a way she hadn't expected. They ended up on the deck, standing side by side, looking out at the ocean. The sunset was just beginning, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Emma took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. It felt like the world had slowed down, the noise of everything else fading away. Here, on this yacht, with Alexander beside her, it didn't matter that everything had been turned upside down just hours ago. For the first time that day, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her voice carrying in the cool breeze. Alexander smiled, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "It is," he agreed. "And this, all of this, it's ours if you want it, but you don't have to choose it right now. We'll take it slow. I just want you to know that this is your choice." For the first time in what felt like ages, Emma realized that maybe she didn't need to have everything figured out right away. Maybe, just maybe, she could take her time and see where this journey with Alexander would lead, one step at a time.